Welcome to Engineering Influence Podcast for the American Council of Engineering Companies. And one of the things that we have been working very hard at here at ACEC is trying to get out the word about the essential value that engineering delivers to society, the economy, and really the nation at large. And one way to do that is to put a spotlight on the projects that our member firms produce on a regular basis. Now, to do that, we have amplified our voice by inviting two other organizations to join us on this effort, the American Public Works Association and the American Society of Civil Engineers. And to talk about this Engineering and Public Works Roadshow, we're very pleased today to be joined by the executives from all three of these organizations, of course, starting with our own President and CEO, Linda Bauer-Dar, as well as CEO of the American Public Works Association, Scott Grayson, and Tom Smith, the Executive Director of the American Society of Civil Engineers. To start this conversation off, Linda, I'd like to start with you, because really the idea for the Roadshow really started in your mind. How did the idea come together for this project?
You know, so I'm coming up on almost 5 years now here at ACEC, and I just remember very well doing the research as I was going in for the search and the interview process, and the thing that kept coming up was the essentiality of engineering. And I remember thinking, why would anyone question the essentiality of engineering? And then obviously the more I got to know our membership after going through the process, working with our board and our executive committee, it's becoming very clear to me that the essentiality of engineering is central to all the challenges that we're facing as a profession and as an industry. Whether it has to do with the talent pipeline and trying to be able to recruit and attract talent, whether it has to do with how we're being paid for the essential work that we're doing, and whether or not the clients value at the level that they should the profession of engineering. And then also obviously the policymakers. We are about trying to influence policymakers in a very positive way to allow us as the engineering industry to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. And so we need you to be supportive and not create hindrances to our success, because that success is really the world's success, the planet's success, and certainly our nation's success.
And Tom, I want to kick it over to you to start off and kind of ask the question of why is now, in your mind, the time to start this project up? Why were you enthusiastic to join in with this idea?
Well, following up on Linda's comments, I mean, you're looking at the challenges that are facing the world and certainly facing the country relative to infrastructure, looking at things like climate change, extreme weather. There are a lot of things that we're facing right now, and we have an infrastructure system that is, much of it, nearing the end of its useful life. So, we came out with a report card on America's infrastructure in 2021. We saw a slight increase over the last 20 years. It went to a C-. Certainly nothing to be proud of, but recognizing there's a lot of work to be done. And as we talked, we realized no one organization can really address this alone, and it requires, a culture change where people understand how essential, as Linda referenced, civil engineering is, and public works, and our infrastructure. A lot of times our infrastructure is, out of sight and out of mind. Sometimes it's really in sight and in mind when you're sitting in traffic for hours on end. But I think we've turned a corner where the public understands the importance of our infrastructure. Policymakers understood the importance of our infrastructure. It was just how do we get it over the finish line? And the finish line ended up just being the starting line with the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and Science Act. We all kind of came together here advocating for these things, the three of our organizations, and that's why this roadshow is so important. So now that we have got some investment in infrastructure, we've got to make sure we do it right. We're now investing in building for the next 100 years, so we have to make sure we're doing it properly. And also, by the way, we have a lot more investment that's needed. So we're staying together, advocating, make sure the public understands the importance of the infrastructure and the work that that engineers and public works professionals do, and we can do that more effectively together.
And Scott, what's your take on that, and also kind of what's the significance in your mind about these three organizations coming together now? Really, it's all three of the main leading organizations in the built environment. So, why is it the right time, and what's the significance?
Thanks so much. So I'll start with part one, and I would echo what my colleague said. Wholeheartedly agree with that. A lot of our organizations have spent years lobbying Congress and other agencies speaking about infrastructure. And what I often speak about is that we're the ones that know what's happening underneath your streets. And if it's out of sight, out of mind, there's not a lot of passion about funding infrastructure. And we finally reached a point, and I also often speak about the ASCE report card really created that framework about C ratings or lower. And people often say, if your child came home with a C rating, would you be happy? And it was an effort to normalize what's actually happening with infrastructure in the United States. The beauty of the three of our groups partnering in this, and we have history of partnering on other very important projects, but Linda and I were speaking about a year ago, and I said, we've got great awards, but we're presenting our awards to an audience of people who actually understand infrastructure. And so everyone's excited in that room, but we also wanted to make it much more public. And so ASCE has great Opal Awards as well. We have awards, ACEC has awards, and we thought, what better way of highlighting really great partnerships with the public and private sector creating infrastructure and showing Congress that a lot of really great infrastructure projects have been happening, and with the new infusion of money, we can really create amazing things as well as repair old infrastructure.
Linda, I want to bring it back to you because Scott mentioned audiences and who we're actually speaking to, and that's something I know you're passionate about. Who are the core audiences that you want to reach with this effort?
So first, I want to add on to something that Scott was just saying about this partnership and kind of why it's unique, and I agree with absolutely everything he said. One thing that I would add is that if you look at our individual organizations, ACEC represents the business of engineering, right? The firms. And then Tom's group, the American Society of Civil Engineers, represents the individual engineer. And then Scott's group represents the client. We all have engineering in common, and we all are in the built environment to some extent. But we all kind of bring our own unique perspective and our own unique kind of membership bent to the table. So I think that's one of the things that makes this coalition so powerful. When we look at audiences, I think we also need to look at outcomes. For me, the audience is first and foremost, the audience is the public at large, and we're all part of that audience, right? Whether you're a legislator or you're an engineering firm leader or you're an engineer, we're all part of the public, and so we're trying to shift public sentiment. Our conduit for that is the media. So we are trying to gain a lot of media attention to get out to the public. But then if you look more specifically, there's really, I'd say, three target audiences that we're going after. One is policymakers, whether they're legislators or regulators at the state, local level, federal level. And then we're also looking at the next generation, right? Because we want the next generation to be excited about joining our workforce. We don't want them to be running off to software engineering firms. We don't want Google to take all the engineering class, which by the way is limited, to start with. We have so many engineers that we train in this country that come from foreign countries and then go back to their country to do the work. So, we are challenged. The talent pipeline is really our weakest link right now because of its fragility. So we need to make sure that future engineers are excited about coming to work for our firms. And then, I would say finally, it's the clients, right? Because so often engineers are having to defend their work in these mega projects. And sometimes the engineering paycheck is 10% of the overall project. But guess what? if that 10% wasn't done well, the whole project fails.
Yep.
And that's critically important for people to recognize. It needs to be done right, and engineering's the link for that. So our clients need to respect the work that we do, and they need to value us in a way that we are fairly compensated, and frankly, then the next generation is going to be better compensated than the engineers of today. So it really is all linked. We need to capture the hearts and minds of the media, of the public, of our clients, of policymakers, and the next generation.
It really is both ends of the life cycle. It's the work that goes in the beginning of the project. Like you said, it might be 10% of the total project cost, but it is a critical 10% because it really defines the success long term. And then, of course, the public works professionals who then extend the lifespan and continue the successful infrastructure into the future so that it stays and it benefits those communities. Scott, I want to go back to you real quick, and I want to kind of do a broad question here and kind of just what in your mind does success look like for this effort? And I also want to go to Tom on this question, but Scott, let's start with you. It's a big endeavor, but what does success look like?
So I would say that I was at a governor's meeting a couple of years ago, and there was a roundtable discussion about infrastructure. And I said I was so excited because even my mother-in-law, when she read the newspaper, saw the word infrastructure and said, "Don't you work in that stuff?" And so when public works, when engineering, when infrastructure becomes a household word and people are speaking about it, then we've hit a home run, I think. I also think that we're speaking about something which is called asset management. It's not just about creating new shiny infrastructure. To your point, Jeff, Public Works maintains current infrastructure. And I think the dynamic between state and local elected leaders that manage infrastructure, local and state infrastructure projects, the dynamic there is that there's not always the foresight of putting enough money in the budget for the maintenance of the infrastructure. So I think that's a really important point.
And Tom, what's your thought about that?
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think if you look at what is success, if we have infrastructure that is efficient and safe, sustainable, resilient, innovative, forward-looking, future-ready, going to serve our generation, but also next generations. It's going to be harmonized with the environment. It's going to solve, the engineers of today are solving these critical challenges for tomorrow. You look at the Sustainable Development Goals and all the challenges that the country faces, but also the planet. Success is a highly functioning infrastructure, and in order to do that, we need to ensure that we have the best and brightest, minds in the engineering profession and public works as well. And so that's, reaching into the different audiences that Linda was referring to, certainly going into the pipeline and reaching into K through 12. We've got to make sure that folks understand just the impact that you can have in this profession and how critical it is, or you want to apply the best minds and technology to solving the world's issues. Well, the infrastructure systems that have to harmonize with nature are the key to doing that. So success is a highly functioning, resilient, sustainable, efficient, safe infrastructure system that serves our civilization and our communities. And again, that includes current and future generations.
And now, Linda, I know a lot of those aspects are things that we really care about, of course, especially with our members. How important is it for our members to become active in this and really want to kind of have their projects spotlighted, because the work that they do to that right. the resiliency, the future leaning, all these things that are very future forward and attractive to that cohort of people who might be looking at Google, might be looking at the Silicon Valley, convince them to come over to our side of the fence and do the work, because you can change the world and still really be forward leaning.
Yeah, I think the visible images are a really important selling point of the work that we do in engineering. And as my colleagues have suggested, we all have some version of engineering excellence awards, and we all have great visuals of the impact that this profession is making. So, and we also know that more and more consumers of information are becoming more visual, and the next generation is more visible, with their phones at the ready, right? So we need to make sure that we're getting out in front with some really impactful projects. And we started off with an event at the Port of Long Beach with a project that was designed by WSP. It was a gateway bridge for a lot of commerce going, international commerce, frankly. And it was during the holiday season. It was the kind of the kickoff of the Christmas holiday season. And we ended up with a huge turnout. WSP was there to host. Along with us, we had FHWA there with us. We had the executives from the port, a lot of people that were interested, and it was a beautiful bridge. The redesign was so well done. Sustainability, resilience, all the factors, the harmonization with the environment, all of that was built into the project. And we were very fortunate, and I think Tom and Scott have both claimed credit for this, but I know very well, Jeff, that it was probably you that planned it. We had that huge container ship come by our press event just at the right time, and it really
only so lucky.
Only so lucky. I don't know. I'll let you take credit for it, but it really was fabulous because that was the physical representation of the commerce that this port facilitates on a daily basis, and the kind of traffic that's going across that bridge that wouldn't be possible if it weren't for engineering, innovation, and design.
Scott and Tom, I want to go back to you on that because thank you for coming out to the Port of Long Beach in November. What were your thoughts on that event and kind of as the model for the next event? And Tom, we'll start with you because Scott, I want you to talk about what's coming up next for the Roadshow. So Tom, if you want to recap your kind of thoughts on that kickoff event that we had on Cyber Monday.
Yeah, well, I thought it was a tremendous success. It did exactly what we need to do is highlight the importance of our infrastructure to not just speak to ourselves, but to get it out there more broadly. And we got some great media coverage, and that got the message out to the public on the importance of our infrastructure. That was a perfect project because it highlights, the supply chain issues that we've had. And you look at the amount of, of the nation's cargo. I think it's like 15% of our imported waterborne cargo was going over that bridge. And of course the Port of Long Beach and Los Angeles, how important they are to the nation's supply chain. So I thought and also it's a beautiful bridge, this beautiful cable-stayed bridge that's now been elevated so it can handle the post-Panamax ships. There was some real significant engineering that went into it with some seismic design, and it really checked all the boxes so that people really highlighted the importance of our infrastructure. A beautiful visual, as you mentioned, not only with the bridge but the container ships. So it highlighted exactly what we needed to do. It's been frustrating that we watch the Grammy Awards and the Academy Awards, and it's great that we celebrate movies and music, but we are with our own members. Each of our organizations are celebrating our heroes, and these are projects and people that do unbelievable things that we rely on for our quality of life and for life itself in this country. And unfortunately, it's harder to get that message out. And that's where I think we had some pretty good success doing this, and we're really just getting started.
I would say that a lot of times, the one thing that we should take credit for is sometimes those award shows are actually put on in facilities that won awards for some of our organizations. For example, the Super Bowl coming up is going to be played at an Engineering Excellence Award winner in 2008, a grand-winning stadium. So there's a plug for engineering and the Super Bowl coming up. But Scott, give us a kind of rundown on what you thought, and then what's ahead for the Roadshow coming up.
Sure, thanks. And so for the next stop, Tom, we'll make sure that we have a red carpet, just like at the Oscars, and we'll have lots of stars there. One follow-up on the Long Beach stop. What also struck me was I met a lot of people out there who were members of all three of our groups. So individual people were members of ACEC, ASCE, and APWA. And that was really illustrative of our partnership because each of our groups provide something slightly different, and yet we're all able to work with one another. To that end, as we started this Roadshow project, we created a big Excel spreadsheet of all of our awards and saw where the overlap was. And in as much as possible, each of our stops will try to include projects that awards were given from each of our groups. The next stop will be the Main Street Station shed in Richmond, which was actually a historical preservation project, and we provided the Project of the Year award for this. But the beauty of it is it does a lot of things, both in the transportation world, but also helping to bring out community as well. And I'd rather not give away a lot about what it is, because anyone who hears this podcast or watches it, we want you to stop by. But our hope is we'll be riding down on Amtrak train and arriving at the station there, and then have a press conference and speak about what an amazing project this is. This will all happen on Friday, March 24th in the morning, and I'm sure all of our websites will post the who, what, where, and when. And there is also a Roadshow website. Isn't that right, Jeff?
No, thanks for the plug, Scott, because we do have that website, the infrastructure roadshow.org, and the event is in March, is going to be live streamed on that website. And actually, you can go on the website right now and take a look at the live stream that we had at the Long Beach event. And again, we're looking forward to a fantastic event in late March down at Main Street Station in Richmond. And very, very happy to have that in the books, and we're planning for future events in 2023 right now. I do, before we wrap up, want to make, I don't want to date stamp the podcast too much, but this is the week of the State of the Union. And we fully expect the president to come out and talk about past successes, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act and the bipartisan infrastructure law. But I want to kick it over to Tom first, and I want to ask, really, what do you hope the president does mention during his address this week?
Well, I hope he celebrates the successes of the past year. I mean, we've had some historic investment in infrastructure and sustainability and resilience, and so that's great. But I also hope he keeps the pressure on to continue to invest and continue to in our country through engineering and public works and our nation's infrastructure. So I think it should be something that should be celebrated as a success, but it's also a start and not an end of this long journey.
Scott, what do you want to hear?
Well, everything that Tom said, I agree with. One of the issues that we're hearing out in the public among our public works group is that they're very excited about the money, but in large part they haven't seen it yet. And so, I hope he says the money's on its way. We know that a lot of the federal agencies are also having workforce shortages as well, and that they're actually understaffed right now to administer the money that was approved. And so, I hope it's a positive speech about the money is on its way.
No, this is. I thank you. I want to thank each and every one of you for taking the time today to join us for the podcast. It's all have busy schedules, so getting everybody together was a special treat. And I do encourage everyone to check out infrastructureroadshow.org for our past events and to get an idea of where we're going to be going next. Of course, Richmond coming up in March. And again, thank you, Tom Smith. Thank you, Scott Grayson. And thank you, Linda Bauer-Dar, for joining us for today's podcast. Again, this has been Engineering Influence, a podcast from the American Council of Engineering Companies, and we will see you next time.